Hello, this is Lori Vossler for Oral Presentation 3, Geology 105, Spring 2018, discussing the Pleistocene megafaunal extinctions in North America. In this video, I will describe a few of the variety of megafauna of the Pleistocene and give a brief overview of some of the hypotheses posited for the driving forces behind the extinctions of these animals. Here we can see a few types of North American megafauna, several North American horse species which lived from 50 million to about 11,000 years ago. Mastodons arrived about 15 million years ago and went extinct about 10,000 years ago. Mammoths arrived between 1.7 to 1.2 million years ago, and they also went extinct about 10,000 years ago. American cheetahs, which I did not know we had cheetahs, so that's pretty cool, they went extinct about 12,000 years ago. I was unable to find a source for when they arrived or evolved. Ground sloths, which were 9 feet tall, appeared 10.3 million years ago, and they went extinct about 11,000 years ago. We also had camels, and they arrived about 45 million years ago, and they went extinct 10,000 years ago. There are many, many others that I did not mention here, but this is a few of them. So we know of the existence of these animals because of the fossil data, the fossil records, the skeletons that are on display in museums. All of these things contribute to our overall knowledge of these species. So, possible causes of the megafaunal extinctions in North America. First, there's the Greenland ice cores and palynological sources. Both ice cores and pollen cores, that's what palynological means, for those who don't know. Both of these sources provide compelling evidence for there being a major shift in the climate and biosphere during the period of the extinctions. The graph on the left shows the calculated mean annual temperature from a Greenland ice sheet core, going back to just before the last glacial maximum some 22,000 years ago. There were two relatively sudden shifts in temperature at about 13,000 years ago, and again at a little under 12,000 years ago, so a sudden drop in temperature, followed about 1,000 years later by a sudden dramatic increase in temperature. There is a possibility that these temperature changes, coinciding so well with the occurrence of the megafaunal extinctions, could have been a cause for the extinctions themselves. Related to the ice core data is, as I said before, the palynological data, which is similar to ice cores. These are soil cores taken from lake sediments and bogs. This core was taken from Appleman Lake in Indiana and shows a record for about 8,000 years before present, up to about 17,000 years before present. Highlighted is the period of megafaunal extinctions. What this data shows is that during this time period there was a shift in the flora in the area of the lake, which indicates a change in what vegetation was available. This is another indicator of the change in climates at this time. This study that this came from suggests that the megafaunal populations collapsed due to a sharp decline in the availability of nutrients through food due to the sudden shift in climate, because the area was unable to support that level of life. Another popular hypothesis for what happened to the Pleistocene megafauna is the overkill hypothesis. Posited by Paul S. Martin in the 1960s, this hypothesis alleges that the North American megafauna were driven to extinction due to overhunting by Paleo-Indians who had recently flooded into the continent via the Bering Land Bridge. However, Martin primarily bases his hypothesis on the evidence of island extinctions, nearly all of which are caused by human influence, and the concept that the Paleo-Indians may have had prestige in killing many large animals for the sake of notoriety as people do in the modern era. There are definitely problems with Martin's hypothesis, which are addressed by Donald Grayson and David Meltzer in the Journal of Archeological Science in 2003. By the time they addressed it, he had also further developed his hypothesis, and they nicely sum up the four main points of Martin's hypothesis as of 2003 as thus. 1. It has been well established through archaeological and paleontological research that the prehistoric human colonization of islands was followed by often massive vertebrate extinctions. 2. The archaeological phenomenon known as Clovis, marked by well-made and distinctive fluted points and well dated to about 11,000 radiocarbon years ago, is extremely likely to have been created by the first peoples to have entered North America south of glacial ice, and represents the first peoples known to have hunted large mammals in this huge area. 3. Clovis peoples preyed on a diverse variety of now extinct mammals. 4. The late Pleistocene North American mammal extinctions occurred at or near 11,000 radiocarbon years ago. Further, Grayson and Meltzer then disassemble Martin's hypothesis entirely. Their refutations hinge upon the fact that island extinctions cannot be used as an equivalent to extinctions occurring on continents. The Clovis people were not the first people on the North American continent due to evidence of people from over 12,000 years ago having lived in South America, which is 1,000 years before the Clovis people are. So that's already been debunked. While Martin may assume that the Clovis hunters hunted all of the megafauna to extinction, the archaeological sites with evidence of the extinct megafauna are all either mammoth or mastodon, which does not account for the other 33 species that died out in the late Pleistocene. And finally, Martin's assumption that all the extinctions occurred 11,000 years ago has been disproved. Some extinctions occurred 18,000 years ago, well before the Clovis peoples or anyone else documented was there to hunt them to extinction. There is now a new hypothesis recently published in the Journal of Geology in February 2018, which puts forth the possibility of cosmic impacts causing some or all of the Pleistocene megafaunal extinctions. Essentially, there is new evidence now available that suggests, based on chemical evidence found in ice cores and sediment cores, that there was an unusually high amount of burned fauna about 12,800 years ago, which is just about when some of the megafaunal extinctions were occurring, and coincides with the evidence Wolbach et al. Puts forth stating that at about 12,800 years ago, Earth collided with parts of a large comet. The Wolbach article suggests that the sudden climate shift discussed earlier, the Pleistocene megafaunal extinctions, and the biomass burning evidence they found combined with the changes in human culture and population around that time indicate that they all occurred at this time due to the collision with the comet. This map shows the sites of burned biomass with the circles, alongside the locations of ice cores that show the anomalous biomass burnings. This map would seem to indicate that there were multiple impacts with the pieces of this comet, which would account for the widespread but still localized burning areas. Additionally, the Greenland Ice Sheet Project 2's ice cores show a sudden increase in platinum occurring alongside a large increase in the quantity of dust in the atmosphere. The platinum is significant due to it being an indicator of a cosmic impact, and the large amount of dust means that there was a lot of dust in the atmosphere at the same time, which is what would happen if there was a major impact. There would be dust ejected into the atmosphere, which could potentially block the sun and cause what is known as an impact winter. And that is what Wolbach et al. Believe occurred, and is the reason for the sudden shift in climate during the Younger Dryas event. Aside from these three major hypotheses, there are other possibilities that I have not discussed in detail. There could have been diseases that wiped out entire species of animals, or there might have been an important species in a particular ecosystem from when these animals were here, and that particular species may have died out, which would then have broken down the ecosystem and caused a chain reaction of mass extinctions. Or maybe the disease that I have mentioned could have caused the death of some particular species. So those are other possibilities as well. These three major hypotheses, the sudden climate change, anthropogenic causes, and cosmic impacts, may have all played roles. I think that it is likely a gray area between all of these possibilities that led to the extinction of these 35 species of megafauna.